Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. So we're going to get straight into it. Not going to stand on ceremony. Andre Ward has called out Anthony Joshua. I'll get the video up on screen here, or a screenshot of it. And shout out to everybody in the live chat, by the way. So Ward, in this video, said the only person he would come out of retirement for is AJ. Now, Andre Ward and his trainer, I guess former trainer now, Virgil Hunter, said this several years ago, that they were very serious about fighting Anthony Joshua. Does Andre Ward genuinely believe he can beat Joshua? Or is this just about trying to make a load of money? We'll come back onto that. But what I can tell you is, a lot of boxing fans in America genuinely believe that Andre Ward would beat AJ. So I'll give you an example. And by the way, this is AJ responding to Andre Ward's call out. Payday, payday, Canelo voice. So he thinks that Ward's just looking for some money. But here we have Marcus Villegas, who is a boxing reporter. His channel is called, I think, Fight Hub. I've watched many of his interviews over the years. And he put this post out on X. He said, Ward will beat AJ if they fight. It was replied to by Adeola Depot. He said, there's no way you really believe this. Marcus Villegas responded by saying 100% Ward's IQ is on a different level. Adeola Depot said, he hasn't fought for 7 years and you think he can beat a former heavyweight champion? This isn't a Rocky movie. Villegas then said 100 or 1,000%, a smaller guy in Usyk already beat him twice. The blueprint is there for Ward. Now, this has got to be one of the most bizarre takes I have ever seen in my entire life. Let's just think this one through. So here we have Andre Ward. Now, look at his physical dimensions. 6 feet tall, 71-inch reach. He campaigned at super middleweight and light heavyweight. 32-0, 16 KOs. In his prime, he struggled with Sergey Kovalev. That's a prime Ward, not a Ward who'd been retired 7 years. Not a Ward who, what is he now, in his 40s? No, a guy who was absolutely at the peak of his powers and he struggled. He barely scraped by Sergey Kovalev. Let's have a look at Kovalev's dimensions. 6 feet tall, 72-inch reach. So almost identical to Andre Ward. Half an inch taller. Or excuse me. 6 feet tall, yeah, exactly the same height, not half an inch taller. He's got half an inch or an inch and a half extra in reach over Ward. Think about those dimensions. And Ward struggled. He's barely scraped by that guy. There is no area in which Sergey Kovalev is superior to Anthony Joshua. He's not bigger. He's not stronger. He doesn't have the reach. He's not more explosive. He certainly doesn't hit harder. He doesn't have a better chin than Anthony Joshua. I mean, folks, we've seen Sergey Kovalev get chinned so many times now. Sergey Kovalev was down several times early on in his career against Darnell Boone. Andre Ward himself was nearly knocked out by Darnell Boone. A guy who really was a middleweight slash 154 pounder. Do you think that Sergey Kovalev in his prime could have taken the right hand that Anthony Joshua took in the Klitschko fight and gotten to his feet? I'm telling you, Sergey Kovalev would have been knocked out cold, probably for several minutes from a shot like that. Do you think he could have taken the left hook, which Dillian White hit AJ with? Do you think he could have taken all the shots that Andy Ruiz hit AJ with and continued getting up? What was it, 3 times? You think Kovalev could have done that? I mean, it's just such a bizarre take from Marcus Villegas, but it's indicative of the mentality of a lot of American boxing fans. And it's really a product of American exceptionalism in previous generations, and also the insular nature of American culture. I'll come on to that more as we progress. But again, Andre Ward got dropped in that first Kovalev fight. Many people today will tell you that there's no way Andre Ward won that fight. He couldn't deal with Kovalev's jab. He was really struggling. Now, in the rematch, he beat Kovalev by ducking underneath his jab, getting on the inside and bullying him, hitting him with body shots and also a lot of low blows. Are we really trying to say that Andre Ward, in his 40s, is going to bully Anthony Joshua? Because Anthony Joshua's got a jab which is like 11 or 12 inches longer than Kovalev's jab. Probably about 3 or 4 times harder. He's got a right hand which makes Kovalev's right hand look like Paulie Malignaggi's right hand. And again, he's not 6 feet tall like Kovalev, he's 6'6". And Andre Ward, who wasn't even a puncher at super middleweight, never mind light heavyweight, he's going to go in there and what, get AJ's respect? I mean, this is bizarre. Here we have, again, Kovalev's dimensions, 6 feet tall, 72-inch reach. Never had a great chin, but he was such a formidable puncher that, and I'm talking about a 175 obviously, that his chin was rarely tested. Now, for Marcus Villegas to say the blueprint's out there on how a smaller guy beats AJ, well, what are we talking about when we say a smaller guy beat AJ? Alexander Usyk is absolutely gigantic compared to Andre Ward. 6'3", 78-inch reach, weighs in the 220s. Andre Ward in his prime, as I say, 168-pounder. You're talking about vast difference in size. Usyk is 2-3 times stronger than Andre Ward. I'm being arbitrary here with these figures, right? But he's massively stronger than Andre Ward physically. He's got enough reach and enough height to be able to box with someone like AJ on the outside. And even then, you look at the end of particularly the first fight, Usyk's face was marked up. Usyk, unlike Andre Ward, has never been down officially in a professional contest. And even unofficially, he hasn't been down from a headshot. He's got a great chin. Andre Ward was nearly knocked out by Darnell Boone. Basically a middleweight/light middleweight journeyman. This is so bizarre, people. I'm telling you. So here we have Anthony Joshua's dimensions. Compare them to Kovalev, who gave Andre Ward all he could handle. 6'6", 82-inch reach, 250 pounds, there or thereabouts. And there's Kovalev, 6 feet tall. So, I mean, there is not one area where Sergey Kovalev is superior to Anthony Joshua. I'm telling you. So why do we have this totally bizarre take from Marcus Villegas? I'm not just picking on Marcus Villegas here. This is a commonly held viewpoint in the United States. Why? Well, because there's a thing called American exceptionalism. There was a time when the United States was at the forefront of everything. Technology, military capabilities, standard of living, you name it, right the way across the line, America was leading the world in these areas. And from that came a superiority complex. And of course, it was the same in boxing. When I was growing up in the 1980s and the 1990s, America was the epicenter of boxing. They had all the best fighters. I mean, very few of the top fighters were not from the United States. Very few. Okay? But this strange thing has happened now. And it's because America is an insular culture. Insular means that you don't pay much attention to what's going on outside. So, for example, most people outside of America know far more about America than America knows about them. Yeah. British people know far more about America and American culture than Americans know about Britain, generally speaking. Obviously, there are exceptions, but generally that's how it is. most Americans, average citizens, boxing fans, whoever, they are inward facing. And this has led to a lot of Americans, I'm not saying all Americans, but a lot of Americans losing touch with the fact that they do not have the same position in the world as a nation as they did 30, 40, 50 years ago. They still are living in this time warp from the 1980s and 1990s. It's the strangest thing. Because, for example, in American boxing, the fans and many fighters and trainers still have this perception that if a fighter hasn't made it in America, they can't be any good. They have to have made it in America. They have to have won big fights in America. Otherwise, they're rubbish. Now, again, there are a few exceptions to that, but for the most part, that's how it is. Now, back in the 80s and the 90s, that was a logical conclusion to come to, maybe. Because again, America was the epicenter of boxing. It's where the vast majority of the best fighters were based or were actually from in terms of citizenship. But that hasn't been the case, particularly in the heavyweight division since the end of the 90s. Americans have been, I'm talking about American fighters, they've barely been at the table when it comes to heavyweight boxing. And in many of the other divisions as well. Not all of the divisions, but many of the other divisions which they used to dominate, they no longer do. I mean, look at the middleweight division. Americans dominated that division for decades. Where are they at now? Do you know what I mean? The light heavyweight division, they dominated that division for decades. Where are they at now? So, the world has moved on. Boxing has moved on. But the mentality of a lot of Americans hasn't caught up, hasn't kept up with the changes in the world. And so you have a guy like Anthony Joshua who fought in America once and got beaten up and stopped by Andy Ruiz. Hasn't fought in America again since. And obviously right around that time there was all this propaganda about Deontay Wilder, which many people still bizarrely believe today, whereby AJ was ducking Wilder despite the fact that he made Deontay Wilder. And this is public record. At least 3 offers. The final offer was directly from DAZN. And it was for over $100 million. And Wilder turned it down. Yet somehow this narrative that AJ was ducking him persisted. Totally bizarre. Okay? Then he gets knocked out by Andy Ruiz, and that really compounds, that really galvanizes the perception that American boxing fans and the boxing fraternity in America had about him. So, yeah, this mentality that if you haven't made it in America, you can't be any good in boxing or in many other things, is the exact reason why Teofimo Lopez lost to George Kambosos. That's the exact reason. Because he and his dad were stuck in, like I say, this time warp mentality from the 80s and 90s whereby, well, I've never heard of this guy. He's from Australia. He's not from America. He can't be any good. We just need to go in there and hit him on the chin and it's lights out. The absolutely catastrophic way in which they underestimated Kambosos came back to bite them in the butt. And this has been seen with American fighters time and time again in recent decades. So this is why a Marcus Villegas can come out and say something so bizarre as an Andre Ward coming out of a 7-year retirement, who's a super middleweight naturally, who wasn't even a puncher in that weight class, who struggled in his prime with Sergey Kovalev, who isn't better than Anthony Joshua. Even this current version of Anthony Joshua isn't better than even this current version of Anthony Joshua in any department. But somehow Ward is going to come off the couch after 7 years and beat 8. I mean, this is so weird. But again, the American boxing community is so insular and they're so locked into this 1980s, 1990s time warp that they can believe nonsense like this wholeheartedly. And this is also why a lot of people in America in particular think that Jake Paul can beat Anthony Joshua. The reality is that that is a gross and ridiculous mismatch. That's what that is. Many of the same people who you'll find thinking that Jake Paul can beat Anthony Joshua would have been the same people thinking that Ngannou was going to beat Anthony Joshua. I told everybody in my videos from day one, that's an easy fight for Anthony Joshua. Never mind what Ngannou did against Fury. Fury clearly hadn't trained for the fight. He was totally out of shape. There is no way, that's what I was saying at the time, that Ngannou, with all the technical flaws he has, in his second professional fight, he's going to go in there and beat a fully fit, fully trained Anthony. I mean, it's just absurd. It was always going to be a comfortable night's work for AJ. But again, you go back and look at the takes that people had, especially in America, in the American boxing media, the takes that they had ahead of the AJ and Ngannou fight, and it will tell you all you need to know. You know, this weird mentality whereby if you haven't made it in America, you can't be any good. It's predicated almost on the idea that fights that you win outside of America don't count. So it doesn't matter how good the opposition is outside of America. None of that counts. You have to be able to do something in America. Yeah. The United States hasn't had a dominant heavyweight champion since the was Holyfield dominant? You could say maybe the 90s. Holyfield and Bo, that era, right? Mike Tyson had his second run, and then Lennox Lewis took over towards the back end of the 90s. We're talking about 30 years ago. Don't you think it's time to catch up? But like I say, the perception of so many American fans, I'm not saying all American fans, shout out to the American fans who actually have some sense, but the perception of a lot of American fans is so warped, it's remarkable. The only reason that Alexander Usyk gets credit from American boxing fans and the American media and so on, to some extent, he doesn't get the full credit he deserves, but to some extent, is because he beat Tyson Fury. Almost 100% of the American boxing media were picking Tyson Fury to beat Usyk, because Tyson Fury had been over to America and, whooped Deontay Wilder and a few bums over in the United States, and therefore they were like, okay, he's done it in the States now, that means he's the best. And it was like unanimous. They were all picking, the vast majority of them anyway, Tyson Fury to deal with Usyk and deal with him comfortably. Because Usyk hasn't done it in America. Yeah, he had one fight in America against Chaz Witherspoon. I think maybe the Michael Hunter fight was in America as well, but that was a cruiserweight. At heavyweight, he hadn't fought in America. He hasn't done it. So that's why they give Usyk respect, because he done Fury in. But it shouldn't have taken that. I picked Usyk over Fury both times. How many of these American pundits picked Usyk over Fury? Both times. How much of the American boxing public picked Usyk over Fury both times? So, yeah, it's a warped perception. Again, shout out to the American boxing fans who actually have sense. But it seems that the majority of them are stuck in some kind of 1980s, 1990s time warp. And they don't realize that you do not need to go to America to prove yourself to be a top fighter. In fact, it's the inverse now. If you're going to prove yourself to be a top American heavyweight, you need to fight outside of America. How about that? You need to fight in the UK. You need to fight in Europe somewhere to prove that you're a top world-class heavyweight. The game's changed. America doesn't have the same position in the boxing world. It doesn't have the same position culturally. And geopolitically, look how many countries around the world are dropping the American dollar as a currency for trade, especially oil. It's an avalanche of countries now dropping the American dollar. This shows America doesn't have the same position it did in the world. I was talking to Kayvon Green. Shout out to Kayvon Green. He's an American guy. But even he was suffering a little bit from this 1980s, 1990s time warp that a lot of Americans are in. When I said to him that America today is not viewed the same way that it was viewed when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s. When I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, everybody wanted to go to America. Or the vast majority of people who I knew and encountered, America was like the promised land. America was seen as so glamorous. New York City was like the most glamorous city in the world. Everybody wanted to visit New York City. And so I was explaining to Kayvon a few months ago in a live that the world doesn't see New York City like that anymore. Other cities in other countries have surpassed New York City in terms of glamour and therefore people's desire to want to go and live there. And the obvious example would be Dubai. And Kayvon would say, no way, New York City still got it. Dubai hasn't got it over New York. Again, this is the insular mentality. No. Dubai has way surpassed New York in terms of glamour. Everybody wants to go to Dubai. I lived in Dubai. I wouldn't want to live there now. It's become, far too busy and whatever. But whether or not you or me or various people in this live would want to live in Dubai is irrelevant, because millions, probably billions of other people do want to live there. So I remember growing up, as I say, in the 80s and 90s, and all my friends were like, oh, New York City, New York City, New York City. I mean, look at what New York was back then culturally. Look how many famous artists, rappers. I mean, New York was the epicenter of hip hop. It's where hip hop started, of course. All the best rappers, the vast majority of them were coming out of New York City, or at least the tri-state area. How's New York City doing for music these days? New York is washed as a city. It's washed. Let's be real. Even in the context of America, there are other cities that have taken over. Even Atlanta has probably taken over New York City in many ways. Certainly within the black community. Atlanta is far more of an epicenter now of black culture than New York City is. New York City is washed. Okay? Just like London is washed now. But some people haven't yet come to terms with that. Yeah? And America in general, as I say, doesn't hold the same position culturally in the world that it used to. It just doesn't. I'm speaking from the perspective of somebody who obviously is not from America, and I've traveled to many countries around the world, spoken to many different people from many different cultures. And I've been on this earth 4.5 decades, all right? So I know what I'm talking about. America's not seen the same way anymore. It's not seen as the obviously there are still lots of people who want to go to America and live in America, yes. But there are so many other places now that are glamorous. There are so many other places that people see as the promised land. Whereas before it was like America and it had very little competition. Now, I'm telling you, among the young in particular, Dubai is seen as the most glamorous city in the world. It doesn't matter whether you'd want to live there. I'm just telling you that for young people, especially outside of the United States, they don't look at New York being that city that they all want to live. No. They don't care about New York anymore. They all want to live in Dubai. It's like a universal thing. I actually got in early. When I lived in Dubai, we're talking about 2008, 2009. When I first went there, and I went back a few years later. So, I was in early before it became swamped and before it became so popular with Westerners. I preferred it then. Now that it's full of like young Western people and people from all over the world, from Africa, from everywhere, who want to slice of that glamour life that they perceive Dubai to have. And obviously there's zero income tax. That's another thing which draws people there. Yes, it's too hectic for me now. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Andre Ward calling out Anthony Joshua. Is he just doing it for money, clout? Or does he genuinely think he can win? I reckon it's probably a bit of both with him. And incidentally, even though there's loads of people who think that, Jake Paul can beat Anthony Joshua, Andre Ward isn't one of them. Andre Ward dismissed the Jake Paul Anthony Joshua fight as, I forget exactly how I described it. He said it was silly or something, or, nonsense. So, yeah. Anyway, let's get on to your questions and comments, and then we'll get onto a bit of other boxing news. So shout out to everybody in the chat. Big up KB. He says, Son of God is about to meet his maker. Okay, I like that one. That one's funny. Big up Muros, man. He says, even having this conversation is completely insane. It is indeed. Shout out to Muros, man. Shout out to Kayvon Green. Big up Kayvon Green. He says, Americans are stuck in the past century. Sports culture differs here. As the largest economy, we're used to being catered to. Indeed. Big up Kayvon Green. Shout out to Mr. Classic Metal. He says, some US boxing fans are convinced that Wilder is the man who can beat Usyk. Their reasoning, it's impossible to avoid that big punch for 12 rounds. Shout out to Afro Soul. Payday. And in fact, I would like to go and see. I don't want to pick on Marcus Viegas. I've been watching his videos for years. I ain't got no issue with the guy. But I would like to go and see what Marcus Viegas' take was going into the AJ Ngannou fight. Again, Andre Ward is a fantastic fighter, or was a fantastic fighter, but he was struggling with man like Kovalev. And to repeat myself, name me one area in which Kovalev is better than Anthony Joshua. Not even in the chin department. Would Kovalev have gotten up 4 times from Daniel Dubois bombs? He would have been out cold. In fact, yeah, somebody asked, how old is Andre Ward? Shout out to Fight Sport Talk. Let's have a look at Andre Ward's actual age. So Andre Ward's age is, it doesn't say on his BoxRec page. Hang on. Let's go to Wikipedia. Right, Wikipedia. Andre Ward. He's 41. All right, the guy's in his 40s. So he's what, 6 years older than Anthony Joshua? Is that what it is? Let's check Anthony Joshua's BoxRec again quick. I think he's got his age on there. Yeah, Joshua's 35. So Ward is 6 years older, and he's been out the ring for 7 years. So we're supposed to believe he's going to climb off the couch and get in there against an active heavyweight, former heavyweight champion. 6'6", 250 pounds, 82-inch reach. There is absolutely nothing in Andre Ward's past, in his history, in his career, which suggests he would even be competitive. Talking about his IQ being on a different level. There is a point you reach in boxing where your IQ cannot compensate for your lack of physicality. Canelo found that out when he stepped up and fought Dimitri Bivol. You can go up but so far through the weight divisions until you just don't have the physicality to compensate. You can only step up but so far to a point where your skills cannot compensate for your lack of physicality. Andre Ward has always been competing with Roy Jones. I think he's been open about that. But he's no Roy Jones. He didn't dominate people to the extent that Roy Jones did. He's not the athlete that Roy Jones was. Roy Jones, of course, stepped up to heavyweight and beat John Ruiz, beat John Ruiz. John Ruiz is not as good as Anthony Joshua. Not as big, not as strong, not as powerful. I remember watching a prime John Ruiz get knocked out in about 30 seconds by David Tua. Right, but anyway, he came back and he did beat a very faded Holyfield. You know, did a few things, John Ruiz. And that is who Roy Jones Jr. beat. It was an exceptional achievement, okay? But understand the level of fighter he was facing that night. Andre Ward will be going up against the guy in AJ who's much better than John Ruiz. And Ward himself is nowhere near what Roy Jones was from an athletic perspective. He doesn't have that kind of power. He doesn't have that kind of speed, etc., etc. And, of course, that was an active Roy Jones. This will be an inactive Andre Ward. 7 years inactive. It is one of the strangest things ever. You know, skill set. Marcus Villegas saying, Andre Ward's IQ is on a different level. Usyk showed the blueprint. Andre Ward can't do what Usyk does. He's not big enough. He doesn't hit hard enough. He's not strong enough. He's not active enough. He doesn't have Usyk's footwork. I mean, thinking that Andre Ward can replicate what Usyk did. What brand of crack are you smoking? Like, what kind of parallel reality are we inhabiting now? When people think that that is a legit take. Yes, AJ's washed. But washed to the extent that he's no longer one of the top heavyweights in the world. Yeah? You're not going to see him beating Alexander Usyk. Probably wouldn't even beat a Caballero at this stage, maybe. A Parker. Right? He's no longer one of the top heavyweights, but he's still a top 10 guy. And he's still been, I say active, he hasn't fought for a year, but relatively active compared to Andre Ward. And he's a hell of a lot younger. So, yeah, this stuff is bizarre. But to Mr. Classic Metal's comment, the US boxing fans some US boxing fans are convinced that Wilder is the man who can beat Usyk. Their reason it's impossible to avoid the big punch for 12 rounds. Let's narrow it down. All right, some people might not feel comfortable saying this. I'm a black man. I'll say it for you. It's mainly black Americans who are saying that. Not all black Americans, but there's a section of the black American community. The LDBC. They're the ones saying that. They're the ones saying, oh, Usyk. Nobody can avoid Wilder's right. They're the ones saying that. Like, come on, bro. Come on. I'm not even going to entertain that conversation because it's so foolish. What did Deontay Wilder even land a flush right hand in his last fight against the Pie? He landed a few right hands, never even dropped a guy. That guy had been blown out in one round by Richard Torres or something, and a couple of other guys like a Jagba. Deontay Wilder got totally outboxed by Artur Szpilka for 9 rounds before he caught him late. Never mind what the scorecards said. The scorecards were ridiculous. Artur Szpilka is a southpaw, similar dimensions to Usyk, but not even in the same universe as him in terms of ability or skill. What, Usyk can't last 3 extra rounds to get a decision over Wilder? I'm telling you, Usyk would stop Deontay Wilder. So, yeah, that's just crazy stuff that those people are coming out with, the LDBC. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, do you think Andre Ward is so hungry for relevance because of his egomaniacal tendencies to where he will make these ridiculous claims just for likes? It might be aspect of why he's doing this. You know, many fighters are egotistical. Their ego helps them to achieve great things. But I think a lot of it is money with Ward, because he never really made big money in his career, you know. Not the kind of money that some fighters make. He never really made that sort of money. So I think that's an aspect of it. But also, as I say, I think Ward is caught up in that American time warp mentality. And he just thinks that AJ's food, he'd be in for a rude awakening if they ever fought. Maybe that'll be AJ's next 2 fights. Maybe he fights Jake Paul, you know, blows him out in a couple of rounds. And Andre Ward still wants to smoke. and he beats up Andre Ward too. You know, coming off the couch after 7 years. A super middleweight. I mean, it would be a bizarre end to AJ's career, right? Fighting a YouTuber and a 41-year-old ex-super middleweight. That would be a real weird end to his career. But shout out to Matt for the super chat. Shout out to Paul McAllister. He says, Ward has always been jealous of British fighters for filling out stadiums when he couldn't sell out a cupboard. He's a very smug and insecure man. Yeah, a lot of American fighters wished that they could have the type of support that British fighters have because of the money that comes with it, of course, and because they like having their egos stroked. So you may have a point there, Paul McAllister. Shout out to Mr. Classic Metal. He says, how do you like Ward's chances versus Bivol and Beterbiev, let's say 8 or 9 years ago? Yeah, somebody asked me this in a recent stream, and they're competitive fights, definitely. I think Bivol beats him. The footwork, the speed, the jab, the combination punching. Ward is a lot slower than Bivol. Hand speed, and not like Ward is slow, but he's a lot slower than Bivol, I'll tell you that. So he'd be trying to get underneath, get inside, rough him up, you know, the dirty boxing. But I reckon Bivol might have enough to eke out a decision against Ward. But it's a close fight, you know, it's a competitive fight. With Beterbiev has proven himself overall to be a better fighter than Kovalev. I think most of us would agree on that. But Kovalev was a little more rangy than Beterbiev with his jab, and that was what gave Ward so many problems, particularly in the first fight. Kovalev was also a touch faster than Beterbiev. I'd maybe be more inclined to pick Ward over Beterbiev than I would be to pick Ward over Bivol. But I'd still probably pick Beterbiev. I'd still probably edge with Beterbiev. When I think about them Kovalev fights, I'm like, there's no way Andre Ward's doing that to Beterbiev. Beterbiev's physically stronger than Kovalev. He's more robust. He takes a better shot. Power is comparable. Although he's got better power in both hands. Kovalev really was just the right hand that he had power in, and you know, solid jab. But in terms of power shots, it was mainly the right hand, whereas Beterbiev's got a wicked left hook too. So maybe side slightly with Bivol and Beterbiev over Ward, but it's close. You know, I might change my mind on another day. Ward was a very good fighter. So shout out to Mr. Classic Metal. Shout out to Simon Brandy. He says, Usyk versus John Jones in MMA. Who wins, Hatman? John Jones. In MMA? Surely John Jones. I don't think Usyk would have much of a chance. Unless he's got some type of hidden elite MMA talent that I'm not aware of. And I have to imagine John Jones will smoke him in MMA. A shout out to Orca for the super chat. He says, I don't see Ward talking like this about Partridge. And again, it's because Partridge won big fights in the United States. And again, Americans have this mentality whereby unless you've won big fights in the States, you can't be any good. The exception being Usyk because, well, he did beat Michael Hunter in the United States. But was that really seen as a big fight? I don't think most American boxing fans knew who Usyk was at that point, nor Hunter. But no, it's because Usyk beat Partridge, Tyson Fury. That's when Americans started sitting up thinking, wow, this Usyk guy's actually good. Because after he beat AJ, they didn't really care much. They were like, it's only AJ, he's rubbish anyway. Fury will deal with Usyk, no problem. And look what happened. So, yeah, that's why you don't see Ward calling out Partridge, because he still has this perception that Partridge is a legit fighter. He's good because he won big fights in America. Like it matters, you know, in the heavyweight division. Indeed, Tony T. It's like UK music artists trying to break America. If you don't, they think you're trash. I mean, in music it's a little bit different because you're somewhat limited to the Anglosphere if you're a British artist, because you're, you know, if there's lyrics in your music, if you're a singer or a rapper, if people don't understand English, then they're not going to gravitate towards your music probably. So it kind of makes sense that in the Anglosphere, people would try to crack America just for the sales, you know? Whereas in boxing, you don't need to speak somebody's language, right, to be able to beat them in a boxing ring. Alexander Usyk doesn't speak much English, but he's come and mashed up all the English-speaking fighters. Sweet Science says, in the USA, the first and last image of AJ is average, Ruiz dropping him again and again. And also that speaks to, like I was saying before, the insular nature of American culture. It's as if all the fights that AJ won outside of America don't count somehow. Isn't that weird? Because, of course, we, outside of the States, we look at AJ's career in totality. We don't just distill it all down to the Andy Ruiz fight and judge him based on one fight. We judge AJ based on the totality of his career. We look at the good wins he had against people like Klitschko, Joseph Parker, Ruiz in the rematch, Alexander Povetkin, etc., etc. We look at those as well as looking at his defeats to Ruiz, Usyk twice, Daniel Dubois. We look at the whole thing, but somehow a lot of Americans just distill it all down to him being knocked out by Andy Ruiz, and that's all they care about because that's the only fight that was in the States. It's so weird. He came back and beat Andy Ruiz in Saudi Arabia, right? Oh, but it didn't happen in America, so it don't really count. I mean, it's a weird mentality, bro. Shout out to Evil Uncle Phil. He says, why the hell has Dubois linked up with Sam Jones? What are your thoughts? One of Dubois' coaches has also left him. Don Charles next, inevitable. Yeah, I just heard about this today, hooking up with Sam Jones, manager. I don't know what to make of it. Who was managing him before? Do you know who was managing him before? Afro Soul says, I didn't know Dubois had management issues. Me neither. So I'm not sure what that's about. Is it the best guess I've got is that maybe the dad is going to take a slightly backward step, you know, step away slightly from being so controlling and let a manager come in and do it and do a lot of the stuff that the dad was doing. That's my best guess. It could be completely wrong. But what do you guys think? Like, I don't know what that's all about. Hooking up with Sam Jones. Will Don Charles be fired? Maybe. We'll see. Because I think it's true, what I've observed and many other people, that Daniel Dubois and also his dad never really respected Don Charles. Because Don Charles doesn't have any respect for himself. The guy just is so hungry for money and notoriety that he's willing to compromise all of his supposed principles. He's got the dad shouting instructions from outside the ring, and the fighter Daniel not even listening to Don at all and listening to his dad. Most trainers would never accept anything like that. But Don Charles accepted it, just like the way he accepted Derek Chisora coming back, or going back to Derek Chisora. How many times? After saying he'd never work with Chisora again, he kept going back when Chisora asked him to. That's Don Charles for you. The guy's got no dignity. And that's why he's accepted this situation with Daniel Dubois, where he gets treated like an absolute sideman by Daniel and the dad. They've got very little respect for him. Will they have more respect for him now since Daniel got chinned by Usyk? Will they listen to him more now? I don't know. We shall see. But we've got some other bits of boxing news to talk about here. Actually, not too much. Did I have some other boxing news to talk about? In fact, before we talk about any other boxing business, I just want to run a little plug for my latest Patreon content. So hold tight for a couple of minutes. Listen to the plug. There's some content you might be interested in. Make sure you check out my Moses Itauma Dillian White film study on Patreon. It's 1 hour of me going through actual footage from both of their fights and pointing out various technical flaws and proficiencies in both men ahead of their matchup next weekend. Will this be liftoff for Moses Itauma, or will the young contender be exposed as another pretender by the old warhorse Dillian White? This film study may persuade you one way or the other. Also, check out this other recent film study I've done, Alexander Usyk, Signs of Decline, where I go through footage of some of his fights, including his most recent win over Daniel Dubois, and point out what I believe to be indications of Father Time catching up with him. As counterintuitive as that might sound to some, given the fact he stopped Dubois quicker in the rematch than he did in the first fight, but there are reasons for that, which I go into. So make sure you check these videos out. You can access them along with previous film studies I've done and hundreds of hours of other exclusive boxing content on my Patreon page via the boxing tier, the Boxing Brotherhood. There's no contract, no commitment. You can cancel at any time. It's cheaper than a cup of coffee. You know the routine by now. All the links are in the description box below. I'll see you over there. All right, so moving on from this AJ Andre Ward nonsense, because that's what it is. It's silly nonsense, which only casuals are really buying into. But you know, maybe AJ can have a couple of easy paydays at the end of his career. Unexpected easy paydays. I mean, they're talking about the Jake Paul fight maybe being more commercially lucrative than the Tyson Fury fight, which is just insane. But like I say, it speaks to the ignorance and delusion of a lot of casuals out there, particularly stateside, that they would tune into something like that expecting to see a competitive fight. The guy that lost to Tommy Fury, who struggled in the late rounds against Chavez Jr. He's an absolute novice. He's going to go in there and beat AJ? I mean, it's just flipping bizarre. Jake Paul couldn't beat Francis Ngannou, bro. Ngannou would make mincemeat of Jake Paul, even now. It's the strangest thing. So maybe AJ has an easy payday there, and an easy payday to cap it off against a 41-year-old super middleweight in Andre Ward, coming off a 7-year layoff. So let's move on to talking about the Itauma versus White face-off, and Dillian White's demeanor and his approach in the run-up to this contest. Shout out to everybody in the live chat. Shout out to someone for the super chat. He says, could not agree more about the American superiority complex. America has not had the top heavyweight, amateur or pro in nearly 3 decades, cruiserweight in 2 decades, and light heavyweight in nearly 1 decade. Also, Sam Jones Dubois. Shout out to someone for the super chat. Yeah, the American exceptionalism, the time warp, and let me give America its flowers. I'm not a hater here, all right? Most of my favorite fighters of all time are American fighters because there was a time when America really was doing it like that. America was dominating boxing. America was dominating in so many aspects in terms of the arts, culture, etc., etc. Some aspect, music, when I say arts. Popular music, that is. So I'll give America its flowers all day long. I'm not some, hater of a country that does things exceptionally well just because I'm not from there. Not at all. But the world has moved on, boxing has moved on, and things ain't the same anymore. It is what it is. A lot of people interested in this Daniel Dubois, Sam Jones thing. I'm kind of baffled by it too. As I say, my best guess is perhaps that the dad is going to take more of a back seat moving forward, potentially. I could be totally wrong. More of a back seat, potentially. And so they're bringing Sam Jones in to do a lot of the work that the dad was previously doing. I hear you, AAA. I got you. I will add you back after the stream. On my latest upload on Patreon, if you can just put your Element username there, I'll add you back because I need the username to add people. Mac B says, Hatman AJ would KO both Paul brothers on the same night. Easy work. Absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, again, shout out to someone for the super chat. So, yeah, let's talk about this Moses Itauma Dillian White build up. Some people are comparing Dillian White's demeanor in the run-up to this Itauma fight to his demeanor in the run-up to the Fury fight. And they're saying that's a worrying thing because they were expecting fire and smoke, or at least they hoped for fire and smoke from Dillian White in the Partridge bout, which was several years ago now, but they didn't really get it. It was anticlimactic from Dillian White against Partridge. Well, I don't see the same Dillian White here as I saw in the lead up to the Partridge fight at all. Okay, he's been quiet in the lead up to this fight as he was in the lead up to the Partridge fight, but he wasn't self-deprecating in the lead up to the Partridge fight. Quite the opposite. He was talking himself up, from what I can remember at least. In the little bit of media he did, he was talking about why, he's going to go in there and do the business. Whereas here against the Itauma, he is constantly downplaying his chances. Constantly saying, I'm a nobody. I don't get compared to Mike Tyson like Itauma does. I don't even get compared to journeyman from the 70s like Jerry Quarry. Jerry Quarry is probably a bit more than a journeyman. More like a, contender, fringe contender. But anyway, splitting hairs. Dillian White is constantly downplaying his chances. He didn't do this ahead of the Partridge fight. And my take on it is that it's mind games from Dillian White. Yeah, it's partly inspired or motivated by the fact that everybody's writing him off. So he feels aggrieved. I mean, I saw him put Ade under pressure. That was quite funny. Shout out to Ade, right? And Ade didn't say anything wrong. He just gave his honest view that he thinks Itauma's going to beat Dillian White, but White stuck it on him a little bit. White is a big, intimidating yard man, a volatile character. So yeah, Ade was on his toes a bit there. It was quite funny. But again, shout out to Ade. Dealing with Dillian White can't be an easy thing, especially when you've annoyed him, So yeah, I just think it's Dillian White being sarcastic towards the media because he feels aggrieved that they've all written him off. And also playing mind games a little bit with Itauma because he knows that there's no pressure on him, so he wants to heap the pressure on Itauma. That's why he's downplaying his chances. Well, Itauma's supposed to knock me out. I'm nothing. I'm a nobody. You know? This is a young kid, 20 years of age. He's never headlined a show before. Never mind a show in Saudi Arabia, a very big event. Is Itauma feeling the pressure maybe? I mean, I'm not sure how many of you saw the Grand Arrivals today when Itauma was interviewed on DAZN. He was on, the YouTube channel and everything. I've never heard Itauma talk so much before in my, in the whole time that I've known about him. Did you see how much Itauma was talking? He was talking at like 100 miles an hour. He was talking at like 100 miles an hour. And he was saying loads and loads of stuff. Way more stuff than I've ever seen him say before. Is that just him coming out of his shell a little bit and becoming more comfortable in media situations? Or is that Itauma feeling the pressure a little bit and talking loads because he's maybe a bit nervous with all the expectation on his shoulders? I don't know. I guess we'll find out on fight night. But yeah, I've never seen Itauma talk that much. He's not a Daniel Dubois or a Joe Joyce, right? But he's not that bad at talking. He's not that introverted, but he's generally a man of relatively few words. But in that interview they did with him, with Adeola Depot, Darren Barker, I think it was Barry Jones as well, today at the Grand Arrivals, I was like, wow, they almost couldn't stop him talking. I was like, So maybe Dillian White's reverse psychology of downplaying himself. Linkage says he thinks it was nerves. Askip says Itauma looked a little nervous. Yeah, so maybe Dillian White's reverse psychology of downplaying his chances and therefore heaping all the pressure on Itauma is working. Maybe it's working. Ben Oldham says Itauma trying to be respectful towards Dillian White. Yeah, they were respectful towards each other. Evil Uncle Phil says White's mind games have worked. Carlton Palmer says doesn't seem any different to me. Who, Dillian White or Itauma? Itauma seemed totally different to me in terms of just the amount he was talking. I've never seen him talk that much. He was just blah, 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 blabbering out. But there was one thing he said which was interesting. And that is that the best spar he had during this training camp was after he had only had 2 hours sleep. He said he told Ben Davison and the whole team, I've only had 2 hours sleep. And, maybe he was hoping that they would take it easy on him for sparring that day, because he didn't think he'd be able to perform on just 2 hours sleep. But he went in there and he said he had the best spar of the whole camp on 2 hours sleep. Now, if that's true, it's obviously a good sign, because when you're a young fighter coming up, the nerves are going to get to you to some extent. When they step you up in competition, when you're fighting on the big stage, when the pressure is on, when the expectation is on. And that can lead to you not having any sleep. I remember Lennox Lewis, prior to during the 88 Olympics, 84 Olympics, excuse me. The 84 Olympics when he lost to Tyrell Biggs. He said he never slept. I think it was before the Biggs fight. He only got about, a couple of hours sleep. Is that just an excuse? Is it even true? It's believable. Lewis at the time would have been what? 18, 20? In the 84 Olympics? Somewhere around that. The nerves and everything. They just couldn't get a good night's sleep. Now for me, some people function much better on little sleep than others. I'm somebody that basically can't function at all without a decent amount of sleep. If I don't get at least like 7 hours, I cannot function. The days are right off, basically. I'm not going to get anything done. I can't think straight. Like, I'm useless without adequate sleep. But there are other people, maybe some of you, who are very good on little sleep. You can still think sharply and get stuff done. You're maybe not operating at 100%, but you're still good enough to get stuff done. And that's a very, very good ability to have in a high pressure, dangerous sport like boxing. You know, to be able to function on little sleep, very important, especially for a young fighter. Because it's not just the nerves. The rival team can also play games with you, get up to all sorts of shenanigans to deliberately mess up your sleep, you know? But if you listen to a lot of these like self-made millionaires, high-end business people, a lot of them can function on very little sleep. And that's what gives them the edge. Well, Kayvon Green said it there. He says he can function on 4 hours. Yeah, it's an advantage. If you can function well on little sleep, you've got a massive advantage over most people. You've got an advantage over people like me, yeah, who can't function on little sleep. You've got a massive advantage. So I don't see it as a problem. It's a superpower. Yeah, if you can only have 4 hours sleep but still function close to 100%, that's a superpower. Cobzilla says they have power naps throughout the day. Oh, some of them. But I've seen others say they literally have 4 hours sleep a night and they're good to go. And these people are like super wealthy businessmen and whatnot. You know, they get up at 4 a.m. every night, every morning, go to sleep midnight, wake up 4 a.m., go to the gym, and then they work like 16-hour days or something. You know, madness like that. That's right, evil Uncle Phil. A young person like Itauma is probably going to be able to cope better on little sleep than an old person like me. Do you know what I mean? For an old guy like me, bro, the energy levels are just not the same. You know, when I do one good training session, I'm wiped out for the day pretty much. You ain't going to get much productivity out of me after that. And if I hadn't slept, bro, as soon as I get in from training, I'm out like a light. It could be 5 p.m. I'm gone. So, yeah, with Itauma's youth, maybe he can cope with stuff like that better. Now, Warren Williams says it's because they're not doing manual work. If they was, they'd be tired, trust me. I mean, even work that isn't manual work would wipe me out, bro. There's no way that I could do any kind of work sitting on a laptop all day with just 4 hours sleep. I could not do a full day's work on 4 hours sleep, bro. Sitting on my laptop, which is what I do for my work most of the time. Sit in front of a laptop, monitor speakers. Yeah. In Circle says Itauma's going to ice White. Yeah, despite what we've been talking about, and despite the fact that I do think Dillian White has a chance, I'm sticking with my original prediction. I think Dillian White is going to get knocked out. I think Itauma's going to do him. Chainsaw says, I want to see a solid White left hook land on Moses just to judge the reaction. Kayvon Green says, nonsense, mental work is so much harder. I have done both. Yeah, I've done both too. And I would agree with Kayvon Green from my perspective, because physical work doesn't take as much concentration. The concentration that you have to have when you're doing, like, I don't know, IT work, stuff on a computer, the mental concentration that it takes tends to drain me more. Yeah. Whereas physical work, depending on how intense it is, I can probably do more hours of physical work because you don't have to concentrate. Your body's almost in autopilot when you're doing physical work. Do you know what I mean? you turn into some kind of robot or drone and you're just picking stuff up and moving this over here. And yeah, but when you have to actually concentrate and think, it takes a lot of energy. But people are different. You know, for some people, the physical work will wipe them out more. For other people, the mental, however you want to describe it, work will wipe them out more. So I'd say to Warren Williams, it depends on the individual. You know, depends on the individual. Yeah, manual certainly can wipe you out, but it's whether it wipes you out more than sitting at a desk having to concentrate and think and all that kind of business, because it takes a different type of energy. What I can tell you is I'm able to do a lot longer physical work without taking breaks than I am sitting at a computer. Sitting at a computer and doing that kind of work, I have to take more breaks more often. Because I just find it difficult to stay locked in and concentrated for all that time when I'm static. Whereas when I'm moving around, again, I'm almost like in physical autopilot, you know? So I can go for longer moving around. Whereas, yeah, office work, it's hard to stay focused, and that can just drain you. It can fry you mentally. Chainsaw says, do you think willpower really plays into getting up from being knocked out? Because if the brain is disconnected, I think you can have the strongest will in the world, you ain't getting up. I think it does play some part, but the majority of what plays into you getting up or not is physical, neurological. But I do think there's an aspect of the psychological too. You know, if somebody's will and their character is fiery and strong enough, I do think that will have some type of impact on recovering from being concussed. I do think it will. It may be only a slight impact on it, but I do think it'll have some kind of impact on them being able to recover a bit more quickly, because the will is just so strong, and so it's like in every fiber of their body. Do you know what I mean? That strong willpower. So I would say, I'm going to throw an arbitrary figure out there. Maybe 90 or 95% of it is down to the physical and the neurological. But maybe 5 to 10% of it is down to the character. And I'm not talking about when a fighter goes down like Dubois and chooses to not get up. I'm not, you know, I think we're on the same page. We're talking about when a guy gets hit and he's genuinely like out of it, like Lennox Lewis was when he got knocked out by Hasim Rahman. Lewis didn't choose to stay down. He was incapable of getting up because he was that out of it. Ah, we're getting into burger neck. Yeah, man said burger head. The burger necks. Yeah, the thing about Fury against Wilder in the 12th round is I don't think Fury was that concussed. I don't think he was that hurt from the shot. I think Fury went down more so because he was physically weak, because he was very weak in that fight. If you remember the knockdown, which was in, I think, the 9th or the 10th round, the shots didn't even look that good. It was like the first time Wilder had landed solidly and Fury went down. Fury was weak from the weight loss, is what it was. He was very physically weak from all that weight loss. That's why he couldn't really punch at all in that first Wilder fight. So, although it was impressive to see him get up from the knockdown in the 12th, I don't think Fury was really that hurt. He was, you know, buzzed, but I think he went down more so just because of his physical weakness rather than being neurologically scrambled. Do you know what I mean? So I think it maybe looks a bit more impressive than it actually is. Because he wasn't, like when Lennox Lewis got knocked out by Rahman, that was different. Lewis was gone. His brain was scrambled. Do you know what I mean? Fury wasn't like that when he went down against Wilder. He wasn't that scrambled. He was just physically weak. Physically weak from the weight loss. Big up Warren Williams. Yeah, if we can stick likes on this stream, folks, it'd really be very much appreciated. It helps these lives get seen. Shout out to Andy Hall. He says, Partridge used the fact Usyk couldn't finish him as if it was some kind of win. You couldn't finish me. Only Partridge could try and turn that around. Well, to be fair to Partridge on that one, you need to be defiant when a guy's beating you if you want to beat him in a rematch. You know, you need to give yourself confidence somehow. And so Fury was defiant, but the problem with Fury psychologically in those Usyk fights is that he was not willing to acknowledge how good Usyk was. And when you're not willing to acknowledge how good a guy is and you downplay how good he is, how are you going to raise your game enough to beat him? This is the problem. And it was Fury's whole team, you know, Partridge's whole team. Maybe they weren't quite as bad as Partridge, but he and his dad were just terrible for it. I mean, maybe you forgive it first time around, but second time around, nah, bro, you need to know exactly who you're going up against to be able to raise your game to the necessary level to actually get the W. Because at that level in boxing, at the elite level, you're talking about tiny margins. Tiny margins will decide whether you win the fight or lose the fight. So these tiny little percentile matter. And something which seems quite simple as giving the guy the credit for how good he is can make the difference, bro. Because again, it can push you to another level when you acknowledge, okay, I need to be better. Whereas Fury seemed to go into the rematch with the mentality of, I got jobbed on the cards. Nah, bro, you got beaten by the better man on the night. So you need to raise your game. Yeah. Trollsabad said Fury came in worse shape in the rematch. Yeah, I think Fury probably couldn't put himself through the kind of training camp for the rematch that he put himself through first time around. And he maybe made excuses to himself in his own mind by saying, oh, I overtrained for the first fight. That's why the little middleweight hurt me. I overtrained. So maybe those are the excuses he used in his own mind for not training as hard for the rematch. But what I can say for the rematch is he was technically better from a defensive perspective anyway. Maybe not offensively, but defensively, he was better in the rematch. Both guys were better in the rematch defensively than they were in the first fight. So Fury's defensive improvements were neutralized by Usyk's defensive improvements. Do you know what I mean? Shout out to Gaz for the super chat. He says, Foreman versus Tony, primes at heavyweight. I gotta go George Foreman. All day. All day. Yeah, James Toney, very slick and quick hands and all that kind of thing, but he had tough fights with Sam Peter, Hasim Rahman, and those guys were not anything compared to George Foreman in his prime. You know, Foreman, although he had slow hands, he had quick feet when he wanted to use them. He didn't always show the quick feet, but he had them. You can see some of Foreman's fights after the Ali fight, for example, where he's up on his toes and he's moving around the ring. Even when he had that debacle against those, was it 4 or 5 guys he fought in one night? I've seen that thing several times. It's on YouTube. And in some of those fights, again, he was up on his toes doing his best Muhammad Ali impression. So he had quick feet when he needed to, when he wanted to use them, right? So yeah, I'll go with George Foreman over James Toney. James Toney did very well to win some fights at heavyweight and compete in some fights at heavyweight, but he was really out of his depth physically. Ben Oldham says Foreman would have just punched Tony in his back. Yeah, probably. When Tony's trying to do the shoulder roll, Foreman would have tried to break his shoulder. And Foreman had a great, powerful jab. He would have been pushing Tony off balance with a jab to the body, jab to the head. I got to go with a prime Foreman over James Toney. But what say you guys? What do you think? Yeah, the baby snatcher thing. Was it Thomas Triber who said that? I didn't actually hear it, but I just saw the thumbnails of Dillian White reacting to it and confronting the announcer. I think it might have been Triber. You guys correct me if I'm wrong. Calling him the baby snatcher. That's wild. Evil Uncle Phil says that was deliberate. Baby snatcher sounds so wrong. It sounds extremely wrong. It sounds as wrong as it can possibly get. Warren Williams says Foreman, the way he could walk up to guys and KO them was mad. Yeah, he was all about his business. He weren't trying to mess around, even slightly. Isaac says, do you think Fury is ducking AJ? Because at this point, I don't understand why he doesn't want to fight. I don't think it's just AJ. It's anybody other than Usyk in the top 10. Yeah, pretty much. Unless there might be a few pies in the top 10 that Fury might be interested in fighting. Proper pies. Tom Schwartz type level pies. Maybe that Nelson Heiser. I think he's got a top 10 ranking, hasn't he? Kubrat Pulev, maybe. He's old as dust. Fury might be willing to fight one of those guys. But other than that, he's not willing to fight anybody in the top 10. Yeah, he's not willing to fight anybody in the top 10, bro, because he doesn't want to allow the illusion that he's at the very least the number 2 heavyweight in the world to be shattered. He couldn't live with it. He can barely live with the illusion of him not being the number 1 heavyweight in the world. Oh, excuse me, let me rephrase it. He can barely live with the illusion. He can barely live with the fact that the illusion of him being the number 1 heavyweight in the world has been shattered. He can barely live with that. But the illusion of him being number 2 heavyweight in the world being shattered as well, you're probably going to mental meltdown again, bro. That's why he's not looking to fight anybody but Usyk if he can help it. Unless he gets a diabolical payday from Turkey Al-Sheikh. An absolutely diabolical payday. Indeed, Evil Uncle Phil summed it up perfectly. He said, Fury enjoyed padding his record until he couldn't pad it anymore. Mac B says, Hatman, where does the whole pie thing come from? Was it Briggs when he called Alex Leopai a pie, or did it come before that? No, it came from that. That's where I got it from. From Shannon Briggs, exactly that. Yeah, because his name was Leopai, and Briggs was trolling Vladimir Klitschko saying, you're fighting pies, you're fighting pies. Yeah. Shannon Briggs, definitely the funniest boxing troll that I've seen for the past, 30 years? Hilarious. First round boxer says, big meteor shower tonight. Saw quite a few from the UK. Oh, is that right? I'm not sure if I can see him from where I am. I haven't had a look, to be fair. It's just getting dark. Isaac says, Hatman, please try to make pre-notifications for your lives so we can expect them. Well, the ones that are actually scheduled, I do. But that's up to YouTube, whether they show up in people's feeds or not. But a lot of other lives are spontaneous. You know, I don't always have time to schedule them. So it is what it is. Because a lot of the time I'm so busy during my day, I don't even know whether I'll be able to do a live. But then right at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, I got a little bit of time here. Obviously, I have to factor in that most of my audience is in the UK. Some of them are in America, okay, but a lot of them are in the UK. So once it gets past a certain hour, I'm like, no point really streaming now. But yeah, a lot of them are just impromptu streams. Ruz says, Briggs following Vlad on the boat was the best troll move ever. That was literally WWE level trolling, and it was damn hilarious. He circled him on the boat while Vlad was on the paddleboard or the surfboard, whatever it was. And he caused waves such that Vlad would be knocked off his board. It was literally like something out of WWE. It was so damn funny, it was ridiculous. And Vlad like started acting all upset and angry, and he wanted to get on the boat. And that's when Shannon Briggs sped away laughing. That was so ridiculous. Now, at the time I was saying that a lot of that stuff was staged, but for those who don't remember, I want to clarify what I mean by staged. I'm not saying that they necessarily choreographed these situations. What I'm telling you is, in my opinion, they allowed Briggs in to the gym, so on and so forth, because they knew that it would be good publicity for Vlad ahead of fighting the next Pi, who nobody cared about. They knew it would draw eyes to Vlad, you know? So it's not that he and Briggs were necessarily choreographing these things, but they knew that Briggs wanted to fight. And I think up to a certain point anyway, maybe there was a point where they said, okay, let's cut this Briggs off now. Let's, shut him down. But up to a certain point, I think they courted and allowed Briggs to do all the stuff he was doing because they thought it was going to be good for Vladimir's fights, against these Pis. Exactly, Evil Uncle Phil. For Briggs to get that close, that consistently, they had to okay it. Because he was all up in Vladimir's gym. Do you know what I mean? There were several incidents where he was in Vladimir's gym. It's like, come on, bro. How's he in Vladimir's gym? Unless they're allowing it. Yeah, even though Briggs was trash at that stage, yeah. Remember, this was several years after he got absolutely destroyed by Vitaly Klitschko. I say destroyed, he got beaten up every single round, but somehow lasted the distance because you had a sadistic refereeing display by Ian John Lewis. I mean, he could have got a man seriously injured or even worse that night. Yeah, I remember when he trolled Hay. That was also funny. And the funny thing about it is, Briggs was never like that in his prime. Briggs wasn't this like WWE troll character in his prime. If only he was, he would have been a lot more entertaining. But Briggs was kind of just, didn't really say much during his prime. It's only in the latter stages of his career, when he was way past his best, that he came out with this troll character. Linkage says Briggs should have stayed in acting. Wasn't he in one of the Fast and Furious movies? Or was it like a Fast and Furious ripoff? Because he was in some movies, wasn't he? Like Hollywood movies. I think when he still had the blonde dreads. Oh, okay, he was in the Transporter. Yeah, with Jason Statham. Okay. Oh, Transporter 2, says Linkage. Oh, he was in Bad Boys 2 as well. Okay. Yeah, Jason Statham. I thought I told you guys to be quiet. I love Godfrey's impression of Jason Statham. Godfrey did an impression of Jason Statham in front of Jason Statham in a radio studio or something. And it was so bang on that Jason Statham was laughing his head off. I thought I told you guys to be quiet. Shout out to First Round Boxing for the super chat. He says, Bret Hart used to call Goldberg William Goldberg. Was his name not William? What was Goldberg's first name? I'm kind of missing the reference here. I know who Goldberg is, obviously, the wrestler, but what is his first name? Is it Bill Goldberg and he just called him by his full name, William? Okay, so it's Bill. All right, so William is his actual name. I guess he was just trying to speak to him like he's his dad or something. Shout out to First Round Boxing. King says, Hammer, what's better, lamb or beef? I prefer lamb. I prefer lamb. It's more succulent. It's more flavorful. Yeah, I prefer lamb. Although I did have a nice beef steak the other day, which was bang on. It was a sirloin steak. Very tasty. In fact, I think sirloin might be my favorite cut of beef for steaks. Because a lot of sirloin steak has got that marbling in it. You know? It doesn't just have fat in one place, like on one side of the steak. And it's not like certain cuts of steak where there's barely any fat in it. Sirloin steak usually has got that kind of marbling, you know, the fat veins, if you want to call them that, throughout the meat. So yeah, I like sirloin. Ben Oldham likes ribeye. Ribeye's good. Warren Williams says, thanks, now I'm hungry all of a sudden. But yeah, lamb for me is probably my favorite. Well, yeah, it is my favorite red meat, is lamb, for sure. Okay, First Round Boxing says, sorry, Hatman, the Goldberg thing just reminds me of Partridge, all the intimidation gone. Okay, rather than calling him Bill, he calls him William. William sounds less intimidating than Bill. I see what you're saying. Although, William Goldberg is still not anywhere near as diabolical a name as Luke Partridge. Luke Partridge is wild. Rosby says duck or rabbit. I've never actually eaten rabbit. I'd like to try it because rabbits look tasty. Just gonna be real. They look tasty. I like duck, although I've only ever had it in Chinese food. You know, the duck with the little pancakes and all that. I think that's the only time I've had duck, is in Chinese food. It's very fatty. And how would you describe the flavor? Gamey? I don't know. Rosby says rabbits are great. Eat them a lot here in Spain. Yeah, it's not that common in other parts of the world. I don't think it's even in the UK. It's only really in like posh, rich neighborhoods where butchers will even sell rabbit meat. And here I've never seen it. Do they even have rabbits here? I don't even know. but yeah, I'd like to try rabbit. So it says AJ should start that Luke Partridge thing. Be even funnier if Usyk started it. If he started saying, Luke Partridge, go and fight Anthony Joshua, and then fight Caballero or Parker. And if you can come through those 2 fights, I'll give you a 3rd shot. And the whole while refer to him as Luke Partridge. That'd be funny. King says, have you tried whale? No, bro, I never tried whale. Doesn't seem that appetizing. Rosby says, I've eaten caiman. It's like a cross between fish and chicken. Ben Oldham says, please rank the best verbal performances at a press conference in order. I'd say Ali first, definitely. Second would be David Haye. Then Eddie Hearn. Then Jarrell Miller. Then Eubank Jr. No, actually, no. Put Eubank Jr. after Haye, then Miller, and then, of course, Mayweather last. Mayweather ain't got no trash talk, bro. It's a good thing he can fight because he's gifted a gab. Well, he doesn't have one. Evil Uncle Phil says, money aside, I wonder why the Saudis didn't want the Parker and Usyk fight. This control they have is unfair to fighters like Parker. It depends on what you mean by control. Because there's nothing ostensibly stopping the, is it the WBO that Parker's the interim champion for? There's nothing stopping them from ordering the fight. I think they have ordered the fight, right? So maybe the Saudis have influence over the WBO and block it on that level. And if that is happening, that's not good. That's very concerning. But if they are not able to block it on a sanctioning body level, then the Saudis are free to pay for whatever fights they want to. I don't see an issue with that. You know? If they don't want to pay for Usyk versus Parker, that's their prerogative. Maybe they don't think the fight will sell. As long as they're not blocking it on a sanctioning body level, I've got no issue with it, really. Gaz says Huey Partridge is better. Yeah, I remember seeing exotic meats in Sainsbury's, like crocodile. I'm sure I've seen crocodile in Sainsbury's over the years. Ostrich, yeah, and I've seen those in Sainsbury's as well, several years ago. But yeah, I saw those things. There used to be, there still are plenty of restaurants, even in the UK, that will serve that stuff. But there was a chain, an Australian bar chain, which I'm not sure if still exists in the UK anymore, called The Walkabout. And they used to sell like crocodile meat and I think kangaroo and all sorts of other stuff as well from down under on their menu. Jimmy says, after a live stream, I watched the boxing film Gladiator. It was hilarious. Yeah, it is pretty funny. Pretty cheesy. King says, what do you think of liver? Disgusting. I don't mind liver. To be honest, I don't mind it. Chicken liver more so than lamb or beef liver, because chicken liver has a more mild taste. So I don't mind it when you cook it up with some onions and peppers and seasoning and stuff like that. I don't mind it. I don't love it, but, you know, I'll eat it. Liver and rice or something. I don't mind it. And it's very high in iron, right? Liver. Is it also high in vitamin B, or have I got that wrong? Oh, vitamin A. Okay. Thank you, John J. Yeah, definitely high in iron. I knew that one. Just wasn't sure about the vitamins it's high in. Oh, it's very high. So it is high in vitamin B. Okay, B12. Yeah, that's what I had that in my head for some reason. Ed Ellaby says, yeah, it is very high in B12. And that's a very important vitamin, especially for men. So, yeah. Liver's good. Roz B says frog's legs are good too, like chicken. I'll be staying away from frog's legs. I can't eat a frog, bro. And Jimmy says, yes, that's why pregnant women are told not to eat liver. Yeah, so it's a good thing for men to eat liver. And that's generally what like big cats go for. Certainly lions, you know, when they kill an antelope or a wildebeest, the first thing they go for is the liver, the organs. Roz B says, it's all psychological, mate. If I gave you a frog and didn't tell you what it was, you'd love it. I mean, you'd have to mince up the meat or something, you know, but I don't know. I reckon I'll be able to detect that this is not a meat I'm used to. I wouldn't want to eat a frog, bro. It's a nasty, disgusting, slimy little creature. I don't want to eat it. And I'm not a particularly fussy eater, but frog, nah, bro. I don't want to eat those things. Dr. Wu says jerk frog's legs. Can you imagine? Somebody's probably done that. Somebody has probably jerked frog's legs. You know? Put the jerk seasoning on there. Pimento. Scotch bonnet. Crazy. Shout out to someone for the super chat. He says, I know you said you didn't lift weights when you were boxing, but do you do any weights now in your workout routine if you work out? Oh yeah, I work out most days. And no, I still don't do any weights. I do push-ups. That's the only strength training. Well, I do push-ups and sit-ups. I guess you could say sit-ups and strength training as well, right? Push-ups, sit-ups, and squats. I do those. But in terms of weight training, no. Body weight exercises, sprints, shadow boxing, hitting a bag, but no weights. All boxing training and body weight exercises. Again, when you're a naturally muscular person, you don't really think about doing weights. Do you know what I mean? Because I've got naturally a high muscle mass anyway. So it was never like in my mind to do weights, because for somebody like me, it would probably be even more detrimental. doing weights in terms of fluidity and all that kind of thing and speed than it would be for a person who's maybe a bit more slim, because then they've got more room to work with. Do you know what I mean? Whereas my body's already quite bunchy and muscular as it is. For me to do weights, it just get out of control. Galaxy Edit says, Hatman, did you ever fight? Yeah, I fought as an amateur from the age of 12 when I was about 27, maybe 20. What was the last fight? It would have been when I was around 26, 27. Ed LB says, snails are the worst. Don't understand how the French and Spanish love it. Yeah, I wouldn't want to eat snails either. Although, there are certain types of sea creature which are like snails, which I have eaten. So, I don't know. Don't mind eating those. Like, in the Bahamas, there's the national dish is conch salad. And conch is a kind of sea creature, right? Which lives in a shell, like a snail. And also even like mussels. I don't mind mussels. I'm not a massive fan of mussels, but I can eat them. And also cockles. I quite like cockles. You know, in the UK, if you go to the supermarket, you can get like cockles in vinegar. I quite like those. Most people probably find them disgusting if they're not British, but I like vinegary things. And so like British cockles in vinegar, I quite like those. Dr. Wu says, how did you navigate your mother's instincts? Presumably she was worried about you boxing. I don't remember her being that worried. Because I was a rough kid. Do you know what I mean? So she was used to me liking rough stuff and doing rough stuff. So my dad was actually more concerned than my mom. My dad was like, why you want to do something like that? Whereas my mom was like, oh, okay. You're a rough kid. You're drawn to rough things. Shout out to 1-1 for the super chat. Big up. Glad you could join us. And I like seafood in general, you know? Loads of different types of fish. My favorite fish is grouper. My second favorite fish is a kind of fish I've only ever seen in the Middle East when I was living out there. They call it safi. I think the English name for it might be rabbit fish, but there are many different types of rabbit fish. This is a small fish with kind of a... How would I describe it? I don't know what the shape is called, but it's a small fish which has got a body shape that's like I don't know how to describe the body shape. I'm trying to think of something. Maybe like a lemon-shaped body, but it's not bulbous like a lemon. It's got a flat kind of body. But if you were to draw a lemon in 2 dimensions, that's the kind of shape of the body, and they called it safi. Small fish, but very tasty. Very, very tasty fish when they fry it. But my favorite is grouper. I fought a super heavyweight. Orthodox. But yeah, and just seafood in general, you know, prawns, shrimps, lobster, crabs. Ming says gurnard is a fantastic eating fish. I only ever tried gurnard once and I hated it. I tried gurnard once and it tasted like flipping sand. I was like, this fish tastes disgusting. Maybe I got the wrong one or something, bro. But when I had gurnard, it literally tasted like the sea floor. It tasted like sand. Of the British fish, my favorite is definitely sea bass. Yeah, sea bass is definitely my favorite British fish. Sea bass is good. It's got a very nice kind of mild flavor, but it has a flavor. Do you know what I mean? It's not like a bland taste. It's mild, but it's nice. I can see why the Japanese like sea bass. You know, Europe, I'm not sure if it's still the case now, but I swear for the longest time they were exporting loads of sea bass to Japan because Japan just couldn't get enough of it. So yeah, sea bass is good. For me, that's the best British fish, sea bass. I mean, you can find sea bass throughout Europe. I'm not really a big fan of salmon. And the last time I had salmon, I actually got food poisoning. So I'm not really a big fan of salmon. Never was, even before the food poisoning. Yeah, I like sea bass in terms of British fish. And you can get it in France as well, sea bass, and maybe Spain. Ed Ellaby says, a lot of restaurants sell grouper but claim it to be something else. Do they? I'm not sure why they would do that. Little Jacob says, I like saltfish. Saltfish is just cod. Just salted cod. Am I going to watch the UFC this weekend? Probably, maybe the day after if they upload the highlights, but my priority is going to be the Itauma Dillian White fight and that card. Right, somebody saying Denzel Bentley's on a silent ban. Is that a guess or... Well, it would have to be a guess if it's a silent ban, right? You're guessing he's on a silent ban. Alan Grill says lionfish is supposed to be nice. Yeah, never had it. I know the fish, but I never had it. Yeah, I heard about the UFC Paramount deal with pay-per-view apparently gone. It's an interesting move. Maybe Paramount are looking to drive subscriptions by not having pay-per-view for now. DAZN didn't have pay-per-view initially. They drove subscriptions that way. Obviously, Paramount's been around a long time, but in terms of like boxing, they're newcomers to it. So maybe they're looking to just drive more subscriptions. And then once they have enough subscriptions, bam, start hitting you with pay-per-views. Like DAZN did. Evil Uncle Phil says, Denzel Bentley hasn't fought since 2024 for no logical reason. I suspect silent ban because that inactivity makes no sense. I think that's a bit of a stretch, bro. There are so many reasons why a fighter might not fight. Politics of boxing, falling out with their promoter, personal issues. There are loads and loads of reasons why a fighter might be out for a year. Silent ban could be one of them, but nah, there are so many reasons, bro. So many reasons a fighter could be out for that long. I mean, Andre Ward was out, but this was made public. You know, Andre Ward was inactive for, what was it, 2 years or something? 2.5 years, maybe 3 years, because of a beef with a promoter who spitefully kept him on the shelf. Dan Goosen, kept him on the shelf. And it wasn't until Dan Goosen died, I think, that Andre Ward was released. Mikey Garcia had a couple years out because of Bob Arum. He had beef with Bob Arum. Didn't fight for like 2 years. Ed Ellaby says, what happened with Top Rank moving to the zone? Don't know, man. Bob's a bit cantankerous, isn't he? So maybe he's not getting on well with Turkey Al Sheikh. And Bob has no filter. He doesn't know how to keep his mouth shut. And that's a problem for Turkey Al Sheikh, who demands to be called His Excellency and all that. He's not going to like a guy like Bob, who ain't going to be calling him His Excellency, or is not going to be comfortable calling him that. And who's not comfortable keeping his mouth shut the way that Bricktop and Eddie Hearn are. At the end of the day, Bob Arum's in his 90s. At that stage of the game, he's not going to care, is he? There you go, Ben Oldham hit the nail on the head. At 90 plus, he doesn't care. Do I drink energy drinks? No, I don't. The only energy drink that I used to drink in school, and maybe a little bit in my 20s, was Lucozade. That's like the original energy drink. I remember when the orange Lucozade came out the first time. They've probably changed the formula now, so it tastes a bit different to the one that came out in the 90s. But I remember when they launched Lucozade Orange, it was like the tastiest thing in the world, bro. I used to rinse the vending machine at school for Lucozade Orange. Yeah, the Lucozade Orange was the one. Trust me, I was rinsing that. Yeah, in glass bottles too. It tasted better in the glass bottles. It didn't have all the plastic seeping into the liquid, altering the taste. The glass bottle was way better. Yeah, Lucozade Orange when it first came out, banging. Yeah, the fizzy one. This was long before the still one. Gaz says sounds like Fanta. Nah, Lucozade don't taste like Fanta. It's different than Fanta. But yeah, Lucozade Orange was liquid crack. That's right, Striker. It was like liquid crack when that came out, bro. I was rinsing the vending machines. What? Yeah, about 3 days worth of sugar. That's correct. There you go. 1-1 also was on the Lucozade before every football match he played as a kid. Loved it. Now, when it comes to certain drinks, you have to bear in mind that they taste different depending on the country. So Fanta in the UK has got far less sugar and additives than Fanta in the United States, and Fanta here in Costa Rica and in the Middle East. In Europe, including Britain, they tend to have a lot less sugar in the fizzy drinks. Now, from a health perspective, that's obviously better. And they have less harmful chemicals and stuff like that. But from a purely taste perspective, I'm telling you, the sugary one is nicer. I'm just going to keep it all the way real. Yeah. The bright, luminous orange American Fanta tastes nicer. It's like Mirinda, right? The first time I ever had Mirinda was in the Middle East. I think that's the first time I had it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was. It was in the UK before I lived out in the Middle East. But the first time I remember having Mirinda was in the Middle East. And I was like, damn, this drink is banging. It was the orange Mirinda. Because they have got so much more sugar in it than the one you get in the UK. And it just tastes better, bro. So, yeah. And yeah, somebody's talking about sugar. But even before sugar tax, the UK drinks were less sugary than American drinks, even before sugar tax. Since sugar tax, what has happened is that now loads of the drinks are either completely sweetened artificially or partially sweetened artificially. And artificial sweetener tastes disgusting. It tastes like plastic or something, bro. I can't drink anything that has artificial sweeteners in it. It needs to be real sugar. Seriously. If it's not real sugar, I'm not interested. Not that I drink a lot of fizzy drinks, but when I do, it has to be real sugar. One says Fanta in Jamaica is different level. Yeah, in the glass bottle, a luminous orange, hits different. Is Morley's a chain or just one shop? No, Morley's is a chain. Morley's is owned by Sri Lankans. Yeah, Sri Lankan people that own Morley's. Morley's is all over. Most of the branches are in South London, but they're also in other parts of London. And I think they've expanded outside of London now as well. Island Grill says Mirinda is the classic Morley's chicken shop drink. Yeah, but Mirinda is, I want to say it's an Indian drink. Is it? Does it originate in India? Certainly the first time I remember having it was in the Middle East, right? Which is obviously not India, but it's in Asia. And it had Arabic writing. You know, in the Middle East, the drinks will have like English writing on one side, and then you flip the can and it's got Arabic writing on the other side. Little Jacob says Morley's is ghetto as hell. The best Morley's that I ever went to was the one opposite the big Tesco in Streatham. You know, near Streatham Common there's a big Tesco. Opposite there, I'm assuming it's still there, was a Morley's. When that Morley's first opened, that was by far the best Morley's, bro. They were so on point with their wings. Oh my days. The amount of times I went back there just to get their wings, crazy. They were crispy. I'm going to sound like chicken connoisseur for a second. Scoville units were talking loud. The jacket, I mean, everything was on point. That was the best Morley's in South London. I don't know if it still is now. Ain't been there for many years, but yeah, at the time, opposite the big Tesco, Streatham Common Morley's, madness. Timbo Slice says the Mexican soft drinks are the best if you ask me. Well, here's one thing I discovered living in Costa Rica. The snacks in Costa Rica, like the Costa Rican snacks, are absolute trash, bro. I mean, the first time I came here, going into a store, looking at all the different snacks, you know, the Spanish writing on them and all this kind of stuff, colorful packaging. I was like, wow, maybe they got some good snacks. And I tried a few of their snacks and they are absolute, they literally taste like cardboard. Horrible. Horrible. No flavor. They're just awful, bro. In terms of snacks, here it's all about American imports. The American import snacks are where it's at. But the Costa Rican snacks are trash. Straight trash. Shout out to Gaz for the super chat. He says, Hrgovic versus a Jack Burton. How? That's a very good fight. Very good fight. I would have been quick to say I would have been quick to say Hrgovic previously. But now, after seeing a Jagba against, I'll probably still go Hrgovic. At the end of the day, a Jagba did struggle with Vianello. So I'll probably go Hrgovic. On points. The Celtic Magician says it's like Polish snacks. They're trash. There used to be a Polish vitamin drink, which you could get from Lidl and some of the bigger supermarkets like Tesco used to sell it. It was a multivitamin drink. It was orange. That drink was absolutely banging. That was actually a hood classic. that Polish multivitamin drink that came in like a massive carton. It might have been like a 2-liter carton. Yeah, not a bottle. It was like, rectangular carton. That Polish multivitamin drink, bright orange, was banging, bro. What? I used to rinse that Polish multivitamin drink. Always in the Polish section for that. It was banging. One says standard of the Costa Rican women the women in Costa Rica is a man that likes black women. Well, you want to be on the Caribbean coast. That's where you find the most black women in Costa Rica. Unless you want black American women, you can find them all over. But on the Caribbean coast, places like Puerto Viejo, there's a big Jamaican population over there. So that's where you want to head to. And yeah, they're very nice, very laid back, traditional. The Jamaicans here are not like the Jamaicans in Jamaica because they assimilate to the culture to some extent, but also the Jamaicans who stay here tend to be the ones who are more chill to begin with. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, never had Jollibee chicken. I don't think, unless I've had it in a airport somewhere. It's a Filipino chain, right? Jollibee. Alan Grill says, I know that drink. I can't remember the name. Yeah, it came in like a green carton and it was a massive carton, like 2 liters. Used to put that in the fridge, wait till it got cold. I'm telling you, I could have done a whole 2-liter carton in about 5 minutes. That stuff was like liquid crack. Was it Dr. Witt? I can't remember the name of it. It had Polish writing on it. It might have had some English writing as well. I can't remember now. Yeah, it would have had because it would have said vitamin, multivitamin drink, but it was orange, like a bright orange color. Ed LB says, who remembers Sunny D? Yeah, I never liked Sunny D. I never liked it. From the time it came out, I tasted it. I was like, ugh, I never liked it. It was out in America, of course, because it's an American drink, long before it came out in the UK. But when it came out in the UK and I tried it, I was like, nah, man, this ain't the one. Shout out to Sheriff Bigley for the super chat. He says, what's your opinion on Candace Owens and do you believe Bridget McCrone is a man? What's my opinion on Candace Owens? I'm not quite sure what to make of her, to be honest. I think she's got a very unusual background. She's basically married to a member of the British aristocracy. She very rarely is seen in public with her husband, but he's like this British aristocrat that she's married to. Which is strange in itself. And after she married that guy, that's when she became this prominent figure in American conservative politics. So I don't know, is she some kind of puppet or what? I don't know. Now, obviously, some of the things that she says I agree with, but I'm always cautious when it comes to public figures, especially public figures who become that popular. She's intelligent, and she says some things I agree with. As far as the Bridget McCrone thing, I've got no idea if she's a man. I guess it's possible in this day and age, isn't it? I know that Candace Owens has been claiming that she is and doing a load of videos and I guess articles and all that. All I can tell you is that Bridget McCrone is very weird because she met her future husband when she was a teacher in her 30s and he was like a 14-year-old boy in school as one of her students. I mean, try to tell me that's not weird. So whether she's a biological man or not, or a biological woman, I couldn't tell you. But what I can tell you is, bro, she's in her 30s and she meets her future husband when he was like a 13-year-old boy as one of her students in school. No. Imagine if that was a man. Yeah. Imagine if it was a man in his 30s and he met his future wife when she was like 13 in school. Imagine how different the narrative would be. One of the things about that whole, is she a man or isn't she thing is sometimes these ostensible anti-establishment figures like Candace Owens can get led astray. Sometimes they can get led astray in order to discredit them. You might have intelligence operatives, people like that, who are feeding them wrong information in order so that they get proven wrong and discredited. So is the Bridget Macron thing that? I don't know. But things like that happen. Encircled says a 24-year age gap between them. Yeah, but it's not just the age gap. If he was in his 20s when they met and she was in her 40s, okay, it's still weird because women don't normally want to date someone that much younger than them. But okay, cool. But no, he was literally a boy when they met. I'm not saying they started dating then, but like, it makes you think maybe she had her eye on him from then, when he was a boy in school. It's weird. Shout out to Black Dynamite for the super chat. Is that John Witherspoon in your, I can't tell who that is in your avatar. Please tell me who that is in your avatar. Is that John Witherspoon? Shout out to Black Dynamite. He says, what's your opinion on Ibrahim Traore? My family home think he's some kind of savior of Africa, but I suspect he's a psyop similar to Kagame. That's what I suspect too. Just seems too good to be true. And on top of that, he's a massive Marxist, which always is a red flag for me. But hey, some people like Marxism. I'm not a fan of it. Marxism obviously more easily facilitates tyranny, when the state is given that much power, when a state is worshipped like a god. That's very dangerous from my perspective. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not a fan of Marxism, communism, or any of that stuff. I don't trust governments to have that much power and control, for my liking at least. Again, some people like living like that. I guess a lot of people in China like living like that. Some people in North Korea probably like living like that. Personally, I don't like living like that. And of all the continents in the world where Marxism, communism, etc. has been tried, nowhere has it failed harder than in Africa. And I'm telling you, it's because African culture is completely incompatible with Marxism. I think the African mind is completely incompatible with it. Right? Africans are the most tribal people on earth. Of the 5,000 tribes that exist in the world, I think it's roughly 5,000 tribes exist in the world. Something like that. 3,000 of them are in Africa. Bear in mind, Africa only makes up about, 1/8 of the world population? But yet it's got nearly 2/3 of the tribes in the world are in Africa. The number of languages also is much higher in Africa than it is on the other continents. And this speaks to how unwilling Africans are to unite, to have a united, how can I even describe it? To act as a unit. Africans are the least likely to do that. There's just so much diversity with tribe, culture, and all that kind of thing. And then you're going to try and put that under communism? Like, come on, bro. Communism didn't work in Europe. Definitely not going to work in Africa, bro. So, okay, Black Dynamite says it is John Witherspoon. R.I.P. John Witherspoon. Great comedy actor. Ben Odom says ethnocentric. Yes, very ethnocentric in Africa. You know, it's all about tribe. What tribe are you from? Your tribal history, so on and so forth. All right, peeps, I'm going to shut this one down. As ever, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining the conversation. With a special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They are Black Dynamite, Sheriff Bigley, Gaz, 1-1, Same One, First Round Boxing, Evil Uncle Phil, Allcar Simon, Brandy, Mr. Classic Metal, Paul McAllister, Matt Borgerson, Kayvon Green, Murazman, and KB. Right? Special shout out to those. And yeah, much appreciated to everybody for joining the live. Until next time, take care, be good. We'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.